Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tiah Tomlin, and I'm a breast cancer survivor and the co-founder of My Style Matters. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we're dedicated to helping enrich the lives of children, cancer survivors, caregivers, and the community at large in an effort to end disparities in cancer care. The Physicians Committee is our partner for tonight. They are also a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's headquartered in Washington, D.C. Their efforts are dramatically changing the way doctors treat chronic disease such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and cancer. By putting prevention over pills, doctors are empowering their patients to take control of their own health. You can learn more about their mission and vision at www.pcrm.org. Thank you so much, Physicians Committee, for co-hosting this event with My Style Matters. Before we get started, I want to share a little bit of housekeeping. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to ask the speakers questions, please use the Q&A box and we'll pull from those questions during the session. Please do not use the chat box. It often moves fast. We're really likely to miss the questions that are added there. However, after the event, we'll be sending the link to the recording, so if you miss anything, you can watch it again. Also, feel free to engage in the chat. We do have, if you have nutrition questions, feel free to post them in the chat because we have a dietitian that will be fielding all of your questions. Tonight's session is all about Black women and breast cancer. This topic is important because Black women are disproportionately impacted by breast cancer. According to American Cancer Society, Black women are 40% more likely to die from this disease. And to address this, My Style Matters and the Physician Committee have brought together some dynamic speakers to shed light on the impact that this disease has on the community of women and what we can do to address this disparity. Our speakers for tonight are Dr. Kristi Funk. Dr. Funk is a board-certified breast cancer surgeon who, alongside her husband, Andy Funk, co-founded the Pink Lotus Breast Cancer in Los Angeles. She has also helped thousands of women through their breast cancer treatment, including well-known celebrities like Angelina Jolie and Sheryl Crow. Dr. Funk is a frequent co-host on The Doctors and a breast expert on the Good Morning America and has appeared on The View, Today, The Dr. Oz Show, CNN, and numerous other national and local television and news shows. She wrote the national bestseller, Breast, the Owner's Manual, and lives in Southern California with Andy and their triplet son. Deitra is a heart health coach. She's the founder of Full Circle Health Coaching and is a vegan soul food culinarian who has a passion for helping Black women live at their optimal heart health through lifestyle interventions that include, but not limited to, whole food, plant-based eating, without sacrificing taste or traditions. Deitra has spent close to 3 decades as a registered nurse, and after premature death of one of her beloved patients, Deitra decided to change the trajectory of her nursing career from bedside to tableside as a cooking instructor and healthy lifestyle coach. Deitra is a national board-certified health and wellness coach, certified for the Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and she will be leading our upcoming program, Food for Life, this weekend. Nneka Leiba leads the EWG Healthy Living Science team, translating complicated scientific topics, particularly those dealing with the effects of everyday chemical exposures on our health, into easily accessible tips and advice. She is an expert in a wide range of issues, including drinking water quality and the safety of ingredients in cosmetics and other consumer products. We are so grateful for each of you for sharing your expertise with us tonight. But before we jump into the questions, I'd like for each of you to share your story. Why breast cancer is personally important to you and how it impacts the work you do. Dr. Funk, we'll start with you first.
Okay, yes. So, there are really only 2 big things I care about. Second to my relationship with God would be loving my family, and then killing cancer. I am all about doing my best to inform women across the world that they have so much more control over this disease than they ever thought or imagined. And I'm so impassioned by having written my book and having my mind blown open to the world of nutritional science, which no MD gets throughout all of training, and all of the rock solid evidence that you can find there that supports how healthy nutrition and lifestyle behaviors can dramatically alter the course of your life destiny in terms of all of life's major killers: heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, and of course, cancer. So it was really my book that transformed me into having this powerful message that you are ultimately in control of you. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here and to share some of my knowledge tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Miss Deitra, how about you? What is your connection to breast cancer? How is this so personal to you?
Well, I have two stories. So the first one, my best friend actually passed away 10 years ago from breast cancer, and she was diagnosed when she was 6 months pregnant with her son. She lived for 9 years. She had, bouts of remission and reoccurrence. But, just the experience with her, supporting her, going to support groups, just wanting to help, others, again, take charge of their health. The other is, you guys may have met my other dear friend, Donna Green Goodman, who is a 25-year survivor and thriver of reversing breast cancer as a result of diet and lifestyle. So again, you can take control of your health through diet and lifestyle.
Thank you. And Miss Nneka.
Yeah, I don't think that there are many people, especially now, that don't know somebody who has been diagnosed with breast cancer or some other cancer, probably a family member or a very close friend. So in that regard, it's personal. It's also personal as a Black woman, knowing that I have an elevated risk and looking at our exposures to chemicals across the board and the chemicals that have been linked to breast cancer and other cancers, and knowing that Black women may not have the same access to healthier products as other women because of the products that we use and what's available. And obviously I'll talk more about that. So that's where it becomes really much a driver for me in trying to close that disparity across the board, trying to ensure that there's safer products available for everyone. So whatever steps we can take, whether it's safer personal care products or healthier foods or reducing food deserts or whatever it is that we can do in that regard, we have better products with fewer carcinogens available for everyone.
Thank you so much. And as you all know, I'm a breast cancer survivor, so that's kind of what my connection is. And I really have a passion for it because as I was going through my own journey, I just saw so many gaps in supportive services. And I said, I want to be a part of the solution. I want to educate myself more and more. And as a matter of fact, I actually took an integrative approach to my own healing from breast cancer and, learned about EWG. And so thank you so much, Nneka, for joining tonight. But I made those drastic changes. The first thing I did after getting my diagnosis and telling my family and saw my doctor, came home, got a box and got rid of every single thing in my house. So this topic tonight is very, very near and dear to my heart. And I really want to share this with women in our community. So over the last 25 years, when we think about breast cancer, we see a lot of improvements in this space overall. And one of the concerns that I have as a Black woman and a breast cancer survivor is that we haven't seen much change for Black women. And so what do you think are some of the leading, what's leading to the overall improvements? And what are your thoughts on why we're seeing similar improvements for Black women? What's happening here?
I'll start with this since I have done an extensive amount of study on this very topic. And when it comes to improvements, if you look back at the 70s and 80s, Black women actually had a slightly less incidence of death from breast cancer. So what was happening in the 80s you know, so like spandex, Duran Duran, but also mammography. So mammography came into the world, and now the disparity is hitting. Why? Because mammos lead to earlier detection. This earlier stage of a cancer, the better chance at cure. And so Blacks tending, as a generalization, to be less insured or underinsured have less access to mammographic screening. And there's all this evidence that shows that even if they get, say, even a free mobile mammo, the follow-up on an abnormal mammo, the money, where does that come from? You know, you're going to buy groceries and gas, or are you going to shell out cash to do this workup of something that you hope will be nothing? So it turns out that the reasons are so multifactorial that I'm going to do a speed through PowerPoint for you, because I want you to understand how deep the issue goes, because the solutions are also therefore multifactorial on a personal, familial, community, legislative, political, policy change levels. All of them have to be addressed, because there are factors all along the way that contribute to this widening gap in disparity between Blacks and whites in their survival. So here I go. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Okay. And I'm sharing the wrong thing. Here we go. Sorry, I got this in the way. Okay. So let me just open this up so that it's bigger. Is that looking good for everybody? Okay, so if we look at the most recent data regarding breast cancer incidence and mortality by race, you see that white women have the most breast cancer, but barely. Per 100,000, it's just a wee bit more than Blacks. And then together we have 25% more breast cancer than all other ethnicities. But boom, when you look down here at the bright pink bars, you're noticing that Blacks indeed, as Tiah said, have a 40% increase in the incidence of death from breast cancer, and over 100% more than all the other ethnicities. So what is going on here? One thing is that African-American women with breast cancer, 33% of them are diagnosed at an age less than 50, whereas 22% of white women are. Another level, under 35 years old, you're 2 times more likely to be diagnosed if you're Black than white. So the younger you are with cancer, the more life ahead of you have to get a recurrence and to possibly die. However, if you look at 5-year data, so we're not looking at a lifetime, just in the next 5 years, the bright pink these are the 5-year survival rates by race. So bright pink is where the whites land, and then the duller pink here is where Blacks land. So if you can do the numbers in the most recent period here, the 5-year survival rate for whites is 92%, but only 81% for Blacks. So yes, Blacks tend to get cancer younger, but there's more at play. And the answer is in part in genetics. So these receptors sit on cancer cells when you don't have them. These 3, estrogen, progesterone, and HER2. And I saw in the chat already some people mentioning having had triple negative breast cancer. That's what this refers to. The absence of receptors, there's no targets on the back of this cancer. We therefore almost always treat it with chemo, and it is the most aggressive, most incurable subtype. It's not totally incurable, but it's the hardest to cure. So look at this racial disparity. The non-Hispanic, so Blacks are here. Triple negative is the dark gray. 21% of all cancers diagnosed in Blacks are the hardest to cure versus 10% to 12% in all other ethnicities. So now we're getting it younger, and we're getting a harder to treat and cure type. Here's where I was mentioning how the 70s and 80s, not so much. The dull pink here is the Blacks. So we've got less death in that time. And then look at this crazy gap, just widening and widening. It has dropped dramatically in both groups. We're both trending down, but this disparity here, as we've mentioned, is still standing at a 40% difference. So now you're talking about lack of timely access to quality healthcare, which I mentioned. And this is a map just showing how disparate across the United States we have with the access to that timely quality healthcare. And what we see is that many of the states in which Black women death rates are rising are in the South and Midwest. So this is where we're disproportionately poor or uninsured or underinsured and less able to access advances in screening and treatment. But even if you find it early, so you're showing up for your mammo and doing everything you should, you're well insured or whatnot. Stage 4 stage, Blacks are much more likely to die than whites. So the Blacks are in pink, whites in gray, 99%, 5-year survival rates for early stage, 86 versus 75 if it made it to the lymph nodes, and distant metastatic disease, 5-year survival, 27% for whites, 17% for Blacks. So we're getting poorer access to that timely health care, and it's making a huge impact. Another, I'm just gonna close out the share screen now. So that's like the rapid fire summary, but then there's a big chunk in genomics. So we've heard of like BRCA genes, BRCA. There's a lot of evidence that the tumor genetics that occur in those of African descent are more wild and aggressive. So we need to, the whole human genome project, we need to put more money into understanding these genetic alterations that occur more often in African descents. And finally, we're going to hit it hard, but there's a lot of dietary and lifestyle things that are also contributing to the disparity, and that's where choice comes in. So that's my longest answer of the night. Sorry about that, but I think it's a really good setup for the context of it all.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, you talk about triple negative. I was actually diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. So I totally get it. Deitra, you kind of walk into a different space. What are your thoughts around why aren't Black women seeing those improvements in cancer care?
Well, actually, I had the opportunity. I've worked previously in a managed care setting, and we would, offer for the patients to go and have a free mammogram. And when we would reach out to them, many of them, it was a fear of, one, if they were diagnosed, the harmful side effects, as well as their survival rate. And so I think it's important to think of the emotional part too, and allow people to unpack those feelings and the emotions. And look, my coach always tells me that fear is false evidence appearing real. So, but again, allowing people to unpack those feelings and then offering them the solutions that, you at My Style Matters have, and what Dr. Funk has as well. That I know has been a major part with many of the patients that, I've encountered.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nneka, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I don't have a fancy schmancy presentation like Dr. Funk, but I totally agree with what the other ladies said. And obviously, we've seen great improvements because of increased awareness and early detection and better treatment. But I think that for the disparity in Black women, we really do need to focus, like Dr. Funk said, on the biology and the differences in the biology. Also, issues related to fear of the medical community because of systemic racism, for example. But another big one for my group especially is looking at differences in products used or product types used. So looking at ethnic differences in the foods we eat. Unfortunately, a lot of the clinical studies don't have a lot of diversity in them. So a lot of the findings are very specific to white people or white women. And so it is imperative that we have more studies that incorporate a much more diverse community, so that we get a sense of how these things are affecting all communities or all demographics, these diseases.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's really important for us to bring more attention to these types of issues, not only in the community, but also in our individual homes and amongst our sister circles. My Style Matters, we recently launched a breast health education program to help us keep the conversation going, because we're not talking about it, and to Dr. Funk's, to your point, when you talk about mammograms and women not getting them, this is something that's so important for us to continuously educate the community. We really want to keep the conversation going. But one of the challenges I find, and Dr. Funk, you wrote about this in your book, that many women do not want to hear about breast cancer until they've actually been diagnosed and they want to make some changes. And they need to make decisions around those changes. So, how do we address this issue, and how do we turn awareness into action?
I think we demystify breast cancer as a death sentence. People need to understand that being diagnosed just gives you an opportunity to 180 your life. Rather than thinking this cancer's come here to kill me, I always tell women, no, it's here to change you. This is a life altering moment, and it's your turn to either embrace it for all that it has to teach you so that you go on with your life more empowered by the decisions you're making, or you keep your head in the sand and never find out. Most screening results in a negative workup, right? And so then you just have relief that you don't have breast cancer. So I think that educating women that earlier detection is their best shot at cure, and that there are a bunch of actionable steps that are kind of fun and fairly easy to implement one at a time that can reduce their risk of ever getting cancer, will help them realize that this is not something that you just leave up to fate or not. You get involved in your own health destiny.
Yeah. And not only was, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to add one thing there. I think that's such an important message. And I think for the Black community, it's good to see survivors and to see what happens when you have early detection. So to hear people's stories more, and then you realize it's not so much of a death sentence because you see people thriving. So to have more forward-facing survivors telling their stories are huge for our community, I think.
No, definitely. I totally agree. Before I was diagnosed, I didn't know much about breast cancer. I had an aunt that had been diagnosed when I was in the 7th grade. And so, out of sight, out of mind. And it wasn't until I got diagnosed that the awareness kind of kicked in. And to Dr. Funk's point, I made the decision to, start making changes. But it wasn't, before then, I wasn't thinking about changes. I was young, I was under 40, so I wasn't in that age group of getting screenings on a regular basis. And I was just living life and enjoying life. And once it hit me, it was my wake up call to say, you got to do something. It was my body sending me a message to say, I need you. I need you to focus on me. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk about diet and nutrition as well as physical activity, since we're on that subject of, making those lifestyle changes. And, we see that actually plays a major role in outcomes. So what kind of steps can we actually take to help us reduce the risk of getting breast cancer or even having a recurrence? So Deitra, can you share a little bit with us? What are some basic nutrition approaches that we can take that will help us improve our breast health and overall health?
Indeed. So I think about what American College of Lifestyle Medicine has is that 40% of cancers can be prevented through diet and lifestyle. And so I'm sure many of you remember your mom saying you need to eat your vegetables. Well, here I'm saying it again, you need to eat your vegetables. So how to start with that, when you think of your plate, we want to crowd out some of the things, and I know we'll get into, those a little bit later, and add more of your whole grains. When I say whole grains, I mean not the white rice. You want it with all of the 3 parts of the whole grain. You want your vegetables, that's your dark leafy vegetables like your collard greens, turnip greens, mustard greens, all of those, as well as your root vegetables, sweet potato, all of those. You want your beans and you want your fruit. That is how you can start. And you can start that one meal at a time or one day at a time. You can do a meatless Monday. Those are some ways to start implementing more of the fruit and vegetables. And like I said, the whole grains and the beans into your eating plan. We know that plants, have healing properties, and the different colors, the pigments, help in certain things. For instance, the orange pigment, like your sweet potatoes, like I mentioned before, is in I know Dr. Funk is going to get into this, it's a beta carotene, but it reduces breast cancer by 19%, eating foods that are orange pigment. So that is how you can start. One meal at a time, one day at a time, just adding more plants to your plate.
Beautiful. I'll jump in and tag on to what Deitra said. So absolutely, nutrition is so pivotal. There are 4 boulders on the scale tipping you either toward cancer or away, and you are in charge of all 4. The Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign targets exactly those 4 boulders in a really fun, actionable way. So I encourage everybody to check it out. letsbeatbreastcancer.org. It's totally free to sign up. You get some great newsletters, and then you just feel part of this supported community on this lifelong crusade to reduce cancer risk. So check it out and sign up to get your free newsletters. But here are the pillars. So nutrition, for sure, eating whole food, plant-based, and minimizing or eliminating animal products, meat, chicken, turkey, fish, cheese, butter, milk, and eggs. Okay, and then pillar number 2, exercise. So a lack of exercise is obviously bad, heightened by COVID, with gyms and park closures. So many people are working from home. They're more sedentary than ever. Those junky comfort foods are just a kitchen walk away, and you're sitting around more and not exercising. So a lack of exercise is associated. Get this, just briskly walking for 11 minutes a day cuts breast cancer by 18%. Pep in your step 3 to 4 hours a week, 30 to 40% drop in breast cancer. So bust a move. And if that exhausts you, just saunter more quickly than you did yesterday. Work up to exercise that lasts. How long do you really want to do it? If you can chit chat with a girlfriend, I want to see 5 hours a week, super vigorous, like can barely breathe or talk to anybody, 2.5 hours a week. Those should be your long shot goals. Work up to them as you can. Next, boulder on our scale, alcohol. Alcohol increases estrogen levels, which we can do the converse number, feeds and fuels 79% of the breast cancers found in the Black population. So the vast majority are still estrogen-driven cancers, and it impairs your immune system and creates carcinogens. So even just a drink a day will increase breast cancer if you're premenopausal by 7%, postmenopausal 13%, and onwards and upwards from there, it's basically like 14% per drink. So minimizing or eliminating alcohol, swap it out for some mocktails if you're needing to feel festive. And then the final boulder on our scale is also particularly important to the Black community, and that is being overweight or obese. We know that Blacks are 50% more likely to be obese than whites and 60% more likely to be diabetic, and that whole metabolic syndrome plays into breast cancer causation as well. So I'm going to leave you with 3 of my, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not leaving, but from this moment, I wanted to tell you my top 3 foods that I love for people to fight breast cancer with. And number 1 deserves some serious myth busting. It is soy. Just last January, an awesome study out of Loma Linda followed 52,000 women. And get this, 29% of them were Black. So we have a big Black population studied for, I want to say they followed them for 8 years. There was some length to the study, and what they found is that for your median average consumption of soy milk versus drinking dairy milk, there was a 32% drop in breast cancer. So I can wax on for a long time about it, but won't. Just believe me, the science proves that soy it's not only neutral, it literally will decrease the occurrence of breast cancer between 30 and 60%, depending on the study. And once you have an estrogen-driven or estrogen-negative cancer, it will drop recurrence by about 30% and death as well, 30% drop in death for high versus low soy consumption. So 2 to 3 servings a day. What's a serving? About a cup's worth of tofu, soy milk, edamame, soybeans, tempeh, miso, tamari sauce. Okay, soy. Next group, cruciferous veggies. Eat your broccoli and try to do it raw or lightly steamed. Or if you roast it, chop up a little raw and throw it in. There's a whole enzyme that you're missing when you cook it that makes it magical to seek out and destroy cancer cells, for real. Another African-American study followed 41,000 Black women, and those who consumed a mere, this is a wimpy aspiration in my opinion, 6 or more cruciferous vegetable servings a week, so less than 1 a day, had a 41% drop in breast cancer. So eat your greens, cruciferous veggies, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, bok choy, etc. And then the final magic is flaxseed. I want to see you having at least 1, I do 2 tablespoons of ground, not whole, ground flax seeds. Sprinkle it into a smoothie. I have an amazing smoothie, Dr. Funk's antioxidant smoothie. Sprinkle it in there, put it on cereal, put it in salad dressing. Flax is such a powerful anti-cancer property. It literally has been shown in humans to get rid of breast cancer stem cells, like the epicenter brain of it all. It's been shown to make them decrease, and disappear. So flax.
Thank you for sharing. And this is really a good point that you all are talking about. We're talking about nutrition here. We're talking about all these fruits and vegetables. However, one of the concerns I have, and maybe you all can help me answer this question, is, given the recent events of racial injustice, it's really highlighted a lot of the systemic disparities, both in healthcare and outcomes. And in many of the Black communities, access to healthy food is lacking. From corner to corner, our communities are flooded with fast food, amongst other things. So Deitra, can you talk a little bit about this? With us having less access to healthier options, how can we actually eat healthy when we're in this environment that really doesn't support a healthy lifestyle?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a great question and a great observation, which is true. We have a lot of food deserts, or you may hear it as a food apartheid, where, the neighborhoods, as you mentioned, are saturated, every corner, or more than 4 or 5 on every corner, fast food restaurants. But I would like to share that there are some connecting to a local farmer is also great. And I'll share with you Farmers Market Coalition. It lists, if you go there and click on resources and go to state or state by state resources, it will let you know the farmers markets in your area. With the farmers market, you can also, some of them have what's called a community supported agriculture, and you can order your food, your produce, and you can have it on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. There is also, thinking of your discount stores, have produce in there, fresh produce like your Walmart or Aldi. That's a great place to get your vegetables. And I want to share, there's another organization, Wholesome Wave. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of them. That's a national organization, but I can share what they offer in Georgia. So Wholesome Wave is an organization that ensures that healthy food gets to those food insecure families. So in Georgia, they have 3 programs like Fresh for Less. So at the farmer's market, you get dollar for dollar. So if you spend $10, you get an extra $10 worth of your produce. They also have plant, I'm getting it wrong, I think, Power to Plant. I might have it wrong, but anyway, what it is, you have the opportunity, you get 50% off your fresh produce, and then you get a gardening kit so that you can grow your own food. And you can do this in your home, no matter if you don't have, land outside. You can do it in your windowsill, or you can have it, inside your home. The other one that I really, really like is that they partner with physicians or healthcare professionals, and the physician, get this, write a prescription for food. So they have partnered with one of the larger hospital systems here in Atlanta. And what the patients get, they get the prescription, and this particular hospital turned their McDonald's into a pharmacy with an F, pharmacy. So the patients go and get maybe 30 to 45 pounds, depending on their family size, of fresh produce. The caveat is they have to comply with going, to their doctor's appointment, going to nutrition classes, cooking classes, all of that. So those are some ways to overcome the barrier. Yes, it is true, about the food deserts, but just like, everyone isn't aware of all of these resources, it's out there, and we just have to highlight it and get it in front of people.
Yeah, and that's
the thing that we can do too is, support policies that help to increase the consumption or the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables. I know at one point the SNAP program and the WIC program didn't allow for certain fresh fruits and vegetables. And so incentivizing, but also making it a policy, or making policies that make it easier to get fresh fruits and vegetables to communities that don't have access is super important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've done at My Style Matters is we've partnered with an organization here in Atlanta called Eat Right Atlanta, and we provide produce to cancer patients. If anyone who's undergoing treatment, they actually get their produce from the farmer. So not only are we, helping the cancer survivors, but we're also helping the economy, right? So, we really want to make sure that people are getting fresh produce where the access is not readily available. So we talked a little bit about the communities, the Black communities, and that we're flooded with fast food. And I want to transition here and kind of focus on some of the work that you're doing, Nneka. We are not only flooded with those fast food restaurants, we're also flooded with the beauty supply stores. They're like on every single corner. And what's interesting about this is, not only studies have shown that Black women are the biggest spenders when it comes to beauty and personal care products, but Black women also have the highest toxic load. So Nneka, can you talk to us about, first of all, what is a toxic load? For those who are tuned in, they may not know what that is, but also what does that have to do with the beauty products that are being marketed to Black women? And then how does it tie in also to puberty in Black girls as well as their breast cancer risk?
Yeah, happy to. There's a lot going on in there, all things that I'm passionate about and been working on for 15 years. So basically the toxic load, or some people call it the body burden, is the amount of chemicals that we have in our body because we've been exposed to them through food, air, water. There are chemicals all around us, and chemicals isn't a bad word. Chemistry is everything. Everything is a chemical. So there are some chemicals that are innocuous. There may be some that are good for you, but there are some chemicals that have been associated with health harms. And unfortunately, there are chemicals like that in our consumer products due to lack of regulations and a number of other things. For personal care or beauty in particular, because of lax regulations, there are a number of ingredients that have been linked to health harms, and specifically cancer and breast cancer links. Black women, as you mentioned, use more personal care products than any other demographic, based on a study that EWG did. And I can tell you that just today alone, I mean, just my hair products alone surpass most products that most people use. Happily proud to say that too. But based on the study we did, we looked at about 1,100 personal care products marketed specifically to Black women. And we looked at the hazards associated with the ingredients, or the toxicity of the ingredients, and therefore the toxicity of those products, or the hazards of those products. And what we found was that less than a fourth, or less than 25% of those products would be considered clean or green or had fewer hazards, versus when we look at products marketed to a much wider demographic and everybody else, 40% of those products were devoid of ingredients of concern. That just means that a Black woman looking for a product marketed to her demographic, and this is particularly hair products because that's where you really get into the niche marketing, but a Black woman looking, for example, for a hair product would have a much harder time finding a product that didn't have parabens or phthalates or some of these other ingredients linked to harm. And that's concerning. It's concerning across the board, but it's concerning particularly for Black women because we do have a higher incidence of certain diseases and certain health outcomes and certain reproductive outcomes. So a Black woman who is conscious of those things still isn't able to easily find a product that doesn't harm our health. And then when you put on top of that socioeconomic factors and geographic factors, it just gets a lot worse. One of the outcomes you mentioned is precocious puberty or early puberty, and that's when mostly young girls start to go through puberty at a very young age, sometimes as young as 6. That the incidence of precocious puberty is higher in Black girls. Black girls tend to go through puberty earlier than white girls. And precocious puberty is a risk factor for breast cancer. And one of the things that the literature has linked to precocious puberty is exposure to chemicals that may affect our hormones. So they're called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And you can find these endocrine disrupting chemicals in food, in water, but also in our personal care products. I had mentioned a couple of them before, parabens and phthalates, and there are a number of others. And those are tend to be higher in some of the hair products that I mentioned, as well as actual hormones like placenta or biological ingredients are actually in these products, and those definitely, placenta is going to affect your hormones. You know, it is full of hormones. So the thing that is people should take from this is that you know, wherever you can find products without these ingredients, using resources like or Skin Deep database or any other resource to find safer products, one should choose one. But what we need is more voices to elevate our concern that there needs to be more diversity in clean beauty, or whatever you want to call it. There needs to be safer products across the spectrum. There needs to be safer products, particularly for communities at greatest risk for certain diseases, and particularly for communities that are marginalized, whether by income or otherwise. We really need to focus on those communities and elevate them and elevate the concerns for them and push the market towards safer products for those communities as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been doing with BCCP. If no one knows them, that's the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. I've been working with them to address the issue around fragrance. You know, Nneka, if you don't mind, can you speak a little bit to fragrance and the issues around that?
Happy to. In personal care products, well, first of all, fragrance is in everything. I mean, when they started putting fragrance in garbage bags, I was like, mic dropped, I'm done, because I don't know why fragrance has to be everywhere, but fragrance is everywhere. And because of a loophole in, at least in the personal care product space, you don't have to disclose the ingredients in your fragrance. So you will just see fragrance likely on the label. Unfortunately, fragrance mixture can be made of any number of up to 4,000 ingredients. And without knowing what the ingredients are, you can't really make an informed decision about that product, about the safety of that product, because there are historically some fragrance ingredients that have been linked to reproductive harm and have been linked to endocrine disruption. Diethyl and dibutyl phthalate, for example, are two big ones that people talk about, and those have been linked to reproductive harms in boys and men, and affect sperm quality and other reproductive malformations in boys. And there are other synthetic musks and all of these other ingredients in the fragrance mixture that can affect harm. And the problem there, again, is that there's the lack of transparency. And so while you can be looking at a product and looking at the ingredients and making an informed decision, it's impossible to do that when you don't know what is in that bucket of products. And while I think a lot of people have heard this before, it's a small amount, it's only a teeny weeny bit of a chemical, you know, again, you're being exposed through everything. So whereas, you know, we wear somewhere between 12 and 15 products, or use 12 and 15 products a day, almost every one of those is likely to have fragrance in there. And then as soon as we walk out into our homes, some of us have candles, we have fragrance socks, or cutting boards are there's fragrance everywhere. So although there's a small amount in one product, we're never exposed to just one chemical or one product a day. So we have to look at this synergistic and cumulative effect. And that really adds up and affects our body burden or toxic load, as you mentioned before.
Well, thank you so much. You all have shared a lot of great information tonight. So I want to jump into the questions. We have a lot of questions that are coming through in our Q&A. And so Nneka, just, what are some of the ingredients we should be looking for to avoid in our hair care products?
So I'd love to talk about ingredients to avoid. And obviously I just mentioned 2 ingredients, or well, 3 if you include fragrance. And then, there is p-phenylenediamine and some of the others. But I think it's less about what ingredients to avoid, because if I just tell you 4, you're going to say, oh, well, if I buy a product without those 4, it's fine. And that's not necessarily true. And I don't want to give anybody false hope in that regard. So there are some, and on our website at ewg.org, we go through a lot more ingredients. But I think what's important to do is find a tool like, again, Skin Deep or Healthy Living app, where you just look up a product or scan the barcode of a product, and it will tell you what EWG has rated the product as based on the toxicity. So at that point, you're not just avoiding the 4 chemicals, but you're actually looking for a product that rates well, because we rate products on a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being the best and 10 being the worst. So ideally, you want to find a product that rates well. But yeah, phenylene, diamine, definitely phthalates. You know, if you can, try to reduce some of the products you use. Again, sometimes that's not as easy, but if you can go more natural in terms of like coconut oil and shea butter and some of these other things instead of some of the more complicated products, you know, that's an option too. But there are safer products across the spectrum, so it is possible to find leave-in hair butters, or, you know, whatever it is that rate well on our guide.
Thank you. So another question we have, and this is centered around triple negative breast cancer, and Dr. Funk, maybe you can answer this one. You know, being that triple negative breast cancer is not fueled by hormones, when we talk about diet, what would be the best diet for triple negative breast cancer patients?
Without a doubt, it's going to be a whole food plant-based diet. So every time you lift fork to mouth and chew and swallow, you're releasing factors from that food that ultimately enter the bathtub that every single cell sits in. So it's called the tumor microenvironment. And everything from the animal kingdom, be it meat or dairy or eggs, is going to elevate all of the requirements for cancer to form, to grow, and then to metastasize. Specifically, I'm talking about growth hormones, and the big daddy of them all is called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. Elevated well beyond what you need for your daily cell turnover, only by eating animal protein, never plant protein. And angiogenesis, angio, blood vessel, genesis, birth. Every cancer requires its own little sinister blood supply to bring the nutrients that it needs if it wants to grow beyond the tip of a ballpoint pen in size. So all animal products are angiogenic. They help these tumors increase their blood flow. They increase oxidative stress, this general inflammatory state that your cells live in, which is pro-carcinogenic. And it just beats up your immune system, so it can't repair DNA when it gets damaged, and that is the initiation of a cancer. On the flip side, when what you're chewing and swallowing comes from the plant kingdom, fruits, vegetables, legumes, lentils, beans, peas, split peas, nuts, the opposite happens just automatically with no help from you. Just chew and swallow, and now you're going to be anti-angiogenic in your eating. You're going to lower IGF-1 levels. You're going to lower inflammation. You're going to give a big boost to your immune system and squelch the oxidative stress. Letting your cells live in an environment where everything that cancer requires is absent and everything that health demands is present is your best defense against a triple negative tumor.
What about studies around nutrition and activity regarding reducing recurrence? Are there any studies that speak to that?
Oh yeah, there are for sure a number of them. I have a section in the book on exercise and movement and how to stave off recurrence. And for sure, exercise is statistically shown as one of the independent things you can do to reduce recurrence risk. And I kind of mentioned that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mentioned the goals to shoot for in terms of duration. The best exercise to do is whatever you will do. So if it's walk, if it's swim, if it's tennis, go for it. Just anything you want to do. Exercise doesn't have to be particularly demanding, require an expensive trainer or any such thing.
What about the big S, or 2 big S's, sugar and stress? Can you talk to us a little bit about sugar and, you know, how we hear that sugar feeds cancer, and then also stress and how it's related to breast cancer?
For sure. So sugar does feed cancer. It also feeds all of our cells. It's your brain's most preferred source of fuel is glucose. So if you were to effectively eliminate sugar from your diet altogether, you would be dead. So it's not so much sugar, it's how that sugar comes in the form of cookies and cakes and pies and sugary snacks and candy and sodas. That is rapidly absorbed into your bloodstream, spiking your glucose, which in turn insulin comes flying out and is like, hey, use it or store it, people. Like there's all this sugar around. So you get a high glucose state if you chronically eat like those types of foods, which brings a high insulin state. And eventually, because those foods go hand in hand with a lot of saturated fat, you end up with what we term insulin resistance. Those cells that are screamed at by insulin, like, hey, use the sugar. They're like, oh, la, 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 I'm stuffed with fat, I can't hear you. So that's when the sugar gets flying around the bloodstream, right? And that's when the insulin is flying around the bloodstream. And everybody's blaming the sugar. It actually, diabetes and insulin resistance stem initially from all the saturated fat, but that is always found in these foods that are, filled with sugar. So that's one of the big problems. So sugar is very pro-inflammatory, and that whole inflammation cascade is what it's always all about, this battle of oxidative stress. It all comes down to it. So when the tip of the balance is toward oxidation and stress and inflammation, your immune system doesn't work right. And when it's tipped the other way with antioxidants, the one and only place you can get those, fruits and vegetables and legumes, the plant world. There isn't a single antioxidant in a single bite of anything that came from an animal. So that's basically the sugar thing. It's just really inflammatory. Stress is interesting. Stress, people forget that mind-body connection isn't like loosey-goosey or hokey. It's super real, right? Just ask any guy who's ever had an erection, like mind-body connection. And the same connection is happening when we're stressed out. And we, especially today with, modern day conveniences, everything, like you're constantly accessible, right? I've found that all of our lives are taken up a notch in terms of stress. And what that is doing in like blood draws, studies in humans, is it's elevating this letter factory that might not mean much to you in terms of like interleukin and VEGF and C-reactive protein. These are all of these molecules that come flying out in response to stress. If you're priming your body to constantly outrun a bear, when really it's just that you kids leave your clothes all over the bedroom floor. There's so much traffic on my way to work. Like we make such a big stressful thing out of things that are just like, should be a little more chill about. You're upsetting this cascade of markers that come out, cytokines and things that, again, we're back to the only thing that matters. It's the imbalance in oxidative stress and inflammation, which makes the immune system, if your immune system were perfect all day long, it would be impossible for cancer to form and persist. So stress ultimately affects your immune system.
We have another question, and this goes, we're talking about density. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to have dense breasts and what can people do to lessen their dense breasts?
Sure. So density is graded A, B, C, or D, and it's a ratio of how much on your mammogram there's this white, splotchy, dense breast tissue versus the black, gray, fatty tissue, which never gets cancer. So the fattier your breast, the darker the mammogram. Cancer's always white. So now, if you have a cancer amidst a fatty breast, boop, it's like shining like a white star and we don't miss it. But on the D level, now 75 to 100% of what we're looking at on this mammo is a white, splotchy snowstorm, and you're telling me to see a snowball. So dense breasted women, so A's and B's have more fat than density, and it's a percentage of 0 to 25, B 25 to 50%. It's an eyeballed estimation by the radiologist. Then C is 50 to 75% of the tissue is dense, and D is the densest, 75 to 100. So in our extremes, 10% of women are A, 10% of women are D, and then it's 40-40. So the vast majority, 50% are dense and 50% aren't. The only way to know if you're dense is not to feel your breast and be like, oh, it's so dense. It might be, but it's really just a mammogram reading. And that means two things. Your mammogram, the denser you are, the more likely the reader of it is to miss a breast cancer that's present because it's hiding. And now you have more of the stuff that makes breast cancer, milk globules and milk ducts, as opposed to fat, which doesn't make cancer. If you're dense breasted, Most of that density is coming from a genetic patchwork of inherited factors. Some of it has to do with the big markers of hormonal change in your life. So when you went through puberty, how many pregnancies you had, whether or not you breastfed, so, and when you go through menopause. So the big hallmarks of estrogen change, estrogen increases density. So foods that decrease the estrogen burden in your body will decrease density. Specifically, then you'd want to target soy. We talked about cruciferous vegetables. Citrus fruits decrease estrogen in the body. Flax, of course, all those lignans. And another one is green tea. I feel like, oh, mushrooms. So of all the mushrooms that were tested, you think it'd be some like expensive, fancy chanterelle. The cheapo white button mushroom acts like a blocker of the enzyme that makes more estrogen in your body. It's called an aromatase inhibitor. For some of the cancer patients out there, they'll recognize that word. So white button mushrooms, these will all have an impact on lowering density. And you don't have to eat super physiologic amounts, just some servings a day from each of those categories will do it. The exercise has been shown to decrease breast density. It's really hard to actually decrease density without getting into medications, which we're just not going to want to do. But if you happen to be on tamoxifen for an estrogen-driven breast cancer, that will naturally decrease your density. Being on hormone replacement therapy will increase your density. So you want to avoid increasing it.
Thank you. So Deitra, we have a question for you. You've worked in healthcare for quite some time, and I'm sure you've seen people, especially in the Black community, have fears, right? So what are some of the things that we can do to help eliminate the fears in the community, especially with those who may be dealing with treatment to this disease or even afraid to go for their screenings?
Mm-hmm. I would say definitely connect with organizations such as yourself. Finding those, like Susan G. Komen website also is a great resource, but finding those who are survivors, I think as Nneka and Dr. Funk mentioned earlier, you know, highlighting, being able to locate those survivors. And again, you can find them through your organization, Dr. Funk, and Susan G. Komen, I'm sorry, I was drawing a blank. But those organizations, so you can find someone that is a survivor and can share their story. And as I mentioned already, you know, it's an emotional time. So if it means, you know, connecting with help with that fear, because you really need to unpack what is leading to that fear, and then having someone there to walk you through a solution that is best for you.
Nneka, we have a question for you. So this goes back to fragrance, right? So many people are using essential oils and we're diffusing oils, but what else can we do to, you know, replace the fragrance in our homes, especially when it comes to candles? Are there any specific recommendations that you may have around that?
So I don't think it's necessarily about decreasing fragrance, although certainly you could do that as well. It's more about supporting companies that disclose what their fragrances are, because not all fragrances will contain those ingredients. And now, because of more education and more consumer pressure, more companies are telling you what is in their fragrance. So I do think that there are a lot more companies disclosing, and a lot more that are using certain essential oils. Not all essential oils are necessarily great either. There are a number of them that are quite allergenic, so you do want to be careful and do a little bit of looking around before you choose which essential oil. But there are a lot of products that have essential oil fragrances and they'll tell you what it is, or non-essential oil fragrances and they'll tell you what it is. So I think that those are some of the options. With candles, you know, a simple essential oil in a candle will give you a really great scent. And if it's a simple fragrance, hopefully the company is going to list it. So what I would say is that if you really like a company and they aren't telling you what the fragrance is, give them a call and say it's important. And we've seen a lot of, because of that consumer pressure, we've seen a lot of companies disclose what it is. If they aren't using ingredients that if they're using ingredients that they can stand behind the safety of, then my theory is that they should be willing to tell you what it is.
Thank you. And Dr. Funk, we have one question for you. Can you talk a little bit about thermograms versus mammograms? What's the difference?
Thermogram uses infrared technology to evaluate where heat is being given off from the breast. Remember I talked about angiogenesis, the increase in blood flow to a tumor? That makes a tumor a hot spot. There's more heat emanating from it. And in theory, mammograms are awesome because there's nothing. There's no squashing, no radiation, no IV dye injected into you. But it also doesn't really work. So I have chased down so many swirls of heat on a thermogram that have led me down a path to nowhere that I really discount them as useful, and certainly they're not a mammogram or ultrasound substitute. There's never been a randomized controlled trial to show that thermography impacts breast cancer detection or mortality. And until those exist, it's really just going to be unadvised, because what happens when you even have a hot thermogram is everything you were apparently trying to avoid: a mammogram, an ultrasound, a breast MRI, a biopsy. Like, we try to figure out where that is. There's no thermogram guided biopsy possible. So I just haven't, I wish it worked, but I haven't. It's like a swirling treasure map, and I'm supposed to find some island of cancer that usually isn't there. So I'm not thrilled with that technology yet. I keep revisiting it every 5 years, hoping that it's changed. Mammography, pros and cons for sure. Yes, there's radiation, and yes, it's ionizing radiation that, yes, causes breast cancer. So the big data on that is that if you take 10,000 women and you do mammograms on them every single year from the age of 40 to 74, you will cause 8.6 breast cancers from radiation, but you will have found 860 cancers. So we find 100 times more cancers than we cause with radiation. And there's no like little tag on it. This is like, oh, I came from radiation. So you don't really know if yours was caused by the radiation or not, but those are the stats. So yes, it's an imperfect screening tool, but mammography is where we are right now. It's still the gold standard. It's the only thing that can reliably find stage 0, totally curable ductal carcinoma in situ. So different organizations have different recommendations, as you probably are aware. When do you start? 40, 45, 50? Do you do it every year, every other year? And when do you stop? So my advice is, for normal risk women, I follow the American Society of Breast Surgeons guidelines, and that is to begin at age 40. Don't stop and don't skip years until you think you'll die in the next 10 years. Then that breast cancer that you would find is not going to be the reason for your death. Admittedly, hard to predict that end date, but so those are the answers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know we have a whole lot more questions, but we're running out of time. We're coming to a close. So I want to just say thank you so much to our speakers for sharing their expertise. I want to thank all of our attendees as well as our partners. For those who have, if you haven't had a chance to go out and look, we do have a digital goodie bag. So please be sure to check it out. And so we want to thank our partners, Vistro, Pink Lotus Power Up, the Newark Natural Essence, Hungry Planet, the George Washington School of Medicine and Health Science Office for Integrative Medicine and Health, No Evil Foods, Full Circle Health Coaching, Environmental Working Group, Mama Says, Veg Events, Organic Graffiti, Eat Well, Stay Well, and Demi Blue. Once again, we want to thank you so much for your contributions to our digital goodie bags. You'll find in those goodie bags, you'll find recipes, resources, coupons that will help you live healthy. For more information on individual steps you can take to reduce breast cancer risk, please visit www.letsbeatbreastcancer.org. And of course, thank you to My Style Matters and the Physicians Committee for organizing this event. If you are a cancer survivor that's either undergoing treatment or no longer in treatment and would like to connect with us, please contact us at info@mystylematters.org. Again, thanks everyone. And don't forget to spring into action with your health. Until next time, have a great night.